Welcome back to Using IDIS for the HOPWA Competitive Grant Program. This is day 2 of a 2-part webinar series. Again, my name is Amy Richter, and I am pleased to be your trainer for day 2. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you of a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we are recording today's webinar for use as a training aid for competitive grantees that will be transitioning into IDIS in the future. To minimize background noise for the recording, I have muted all of your phones. Please post any questions or concerns you have in the discussion area located on the left side of your screen. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will find a list of technical assistance resources as well as my contact information. These are available if you think of any questions after the webinar or if you have difficulties as you start to use IDIS. If we have any frequently asked questions at the end of the webinar, we will email you responses. I am again joined by my colleague from CSI, Becky Blaylock. She will be monitoring the discussion area that appears on the left side of your screen. If you have any problems viewing the webinar or the demonstrations, please let her know. She is available to help you. And finally, there are a number of new documents for you to download on the left side of your screen. If you have not done so already, please download these now. These will also become important reference tools for you to use later and will help you to better follow the webinar series. They include a copy of the IDIS user manual, a copy of the presentation for you to take notes on, and 2 new exercise worksheets. If you did not download the materials from yesterday's webinar, please send me an email and I will forward them to you later. Here is the agenda for today's webinar. We are going to start with a short review of the concepts we went over yesterday. Thank you for your patience yesterday with the technical glitches we experienced at the end of the webinar. Because of those glitches, I will re-present how to encumber funds to activities today. Then we will demonstrate how to create and how to approve a drawdown request. Next, we are going to demonstrate performance reporting in IDIS and how to start your new accomplishment year in the second year of your grant. We will go over all of your annual requirements for the lifetime of your grant and how to manage them in IDIS. And finally, I will go over some of the less frequently used tags in IDIS. This will include a brief discussion of reporting tools available to you. This slide represents the scenario we worked through yesterday in the User Acceptance Testing, or UAT, environment. As you will remember, the grantee is the Main Street Housing Corporation, or MHSC. Remember, this scenario is listed at the top of the exercises available for download on the left side of your screen. Looking at the graphic, the grantee owns all of the projects and activities established in IDIS. We established a project for the grantee and one for the project sponsor. Remember, projects are the organizations that implement the HOPWA grant. Next, we established activities for both the grantee and the project sponsor. Remember, activities are both services to be funded by the HOPWA competitive grant and tools to report agency or jurisdiction-wide accomplishments. The activities we set up for the project sponsor included 2 direct services activities, supportive services and administration, and 1 reporting activity, project sponsor reporting. For the grantee, we set up 2 direct service activities, facility-based housing subsidy assistance and administration. We also set up 2 reporting activities, project sponsor reporting and grantee reporting. Remember, grantees who implement direct HOPWA services for clients must have both a project sponsor and a grantee reporting activity. Grantees who only have administrative responsibilities and contract out for all direct client services will only have a grantee reporting activity. Quickly, I'm going to switch over to the UAT to show you the projects and activities we set up. As a reminder, when I am in demonstration mode, I cannot see the discussion area on the left side of your screen. If you have any questions or you have trouble viewing the demonstration, please contact Becky Blaylock in the discussion area and she will assist you. So this is the login screen. You enter in your username, and your password. Remember, the first screen that you will see is the disclaimer screen. So you want to read your disclaimer and push I accept. And remember, you will not have this screen. The next screen you will see after the disclaimer is your news screen. You will have any important messages here, and you will see your user ID, your user role, and your organization. Remember, the first time that you log in, you want to make sure this information is correct, and if not, contact either myself or HUD to let them know. So to search for projects and activities, you're going to click on the Plans, Projects, and Activity tab at the top of your screen. And you remember your navigation on the left side of your screen changes. So the first thing I want to do is search for my projects. So I'm going to go to the word project and click on search. And it will take me to the search project screen. If you remember, all of your grants are going to go under program year 2012 for your 2012 renewal grant. So I'm going to enter that in as a search criteria. Also remember, all HOPWA competitive grants will go in the HOPWA C pathway. So I can click that on. The more criteria you enter, the narrower your search will be. It'll be easier to find. I hit the search button. And there are my two projects that I created yesterday. Project number 1 is for the project sponsor, Case Management Associates, and project number 2 is for my grantee. From this screen, I can either view the projects I set up or edit them. If I hit Edit, it will take me to the Edit Project screen, and you will see the information that I set up yesterday. I have my grantee, my program year, my project ID, the project title that I set up according to the naming convention. You will notice I have associated the organization under where it says Assigned Sponsor for this project. And lastly, I entered an estimated budget, including estimated program income in the HOPWA C line. From here, I can view activities by using this button. These are all of the activities that I set up for the project sponsor. You will notice project number 5 is the supportive services activity. Project number 6 is administration. And project number 7 is my project sponsor reporting. You'll remember as part of the setup, I set up all my direct service activities first, doing my project sponsor reporting last. Another way to search for activities is to go to the left side of your screen and under Activity, hit Search and enter your search criteria. This is where it also comes in handy if you know your activity ID number. You'll remember I gave you some tracking sheets for that yesterday. I'm going to enter my program year. And again, these are all of the activities that we established yesterday. Encumbering or associating funds is the process you will use to tell IDIS how much funding you want assigned to each activity. This process is important because you will not be able to draw down funds against any activity until you have encumbered funds to it. You can only encumber funds to direct service activities once they have been established in IDIS. Remember, there is no funding associated with any of the reporting activities. Before we start, I want to ask you to download several documents from the discussion area on the left side of your screen. First, I have reposted handout number 3 from yesterday. As a reminder, the development of the new IDIS screens for the HOPWA program was fairly extensive. As a result, we are in the process of identifying and fixing some glitches in the system. Handout 3 details 2 glitches that will affect the way you encumber funds and approve drawdown requests, as well as steps to work around those glitches. Please download this now and keep it as a reference with your manual until the glitches have been fixed. I have also posted 2 new exercises based on our Main Street Housing Corporation scenario. Exercise 3 deals with how to encumber funds, as well as how to create and approve drawdown vouchers. Please refer to these sheets during the demonstration of these activities in IDIS. The first glitch that I want to mention has to do with the way users must encumber funds for administration activities. For the time being, IDIS is requiring that all users set up what is called an AD subfund. A subfund is a way for the grantee to set aside funds for a specific purpose in order to better track and manage funding streams. In this case, the subfund will ensure that you do not allocate more than 3% of the overall grant award for grantees and 7% of the project sponsor contract to project sponsors. I am going to start the demonstration on encumbering funds with details on how to set up the AD subfund. Subfunds should be an option, but should not be a requirement. Currently, IDIS is requiring that you set up the subfund. So in order to do that, you're going to go to the top of your screen and hit Grant. It will take you to the Search Grant screen. You'll notice that your navigation tabs on the left side of your screen have changed. You are now going to hit Add under Subfund, and it will take you to the Add Subfund screen. I'm going to enter in my program as HOPWA C. My grant year is 2012, and I'm going to indicate that I would like to set up an AD subfund type. If you have your grant number, that will help, but I can search without it. So it's going to bring up my grant as HOPWA C, my grant year, my grant number, and it's indicating that I want to set up an AD fund type. Under the column labeled Action, hit Add Fund Type, and it's going to bring you to the Add Subfund screen. The first thing you want to do is confirm that the information at the top of the screen is correct for you as the grantee. You will see below that 2 tables. The first table says Source Fund EN. EN stands for entitlement. That's generally used for the entirety of your grants. The HOPWA Competitive Grant Program is the first competitive program in IDIS. So there's not really a label for it. Right now, all HOPWA competitive grants will be listed as an EN source fund. The next table is asking you how much of the available funding do you want to put toward the subfund. My suggestion is that you only add enough funds for 1 year. The reason for this is that we were hoping to fix this glitch in the system, and then you don't have to use the subfund if you don't want to. You want to include enough funding to cover all of your administration activities. That would include grantee administration and your project sponsor administration. So for this scenario, I'm going to enter in $13,000, and I'm going to hit Save. and you'll notice I got my success message at the top. Now I'm ready to encumber funding for all of my service activities and for my administration activities. To do that, I'm going to go to my Funding Drawdown tab. And I'm going to start with my services activities. I'm going to refer back to my tracking sheets so that I know the activity and project ID numbers. The first one that I want to encumber funds for is for my supportive services activity for my project sponsor. That is project number 1 and activity number 5. I'm going to hit search, and you'll see at the bottom of the page it brought up my supportive services activity. In the column labeled action, I want to hit Add Edit. The first thing I want to do is confirm that the information at the top is correct. Is it listing the correct activity owner? Is this the supportive services activity? It's going to also tell you how much I've encumbered to this activity and how much I've drawn, and both are 0 at this point. So I'm going to hit down here under Calcutta House. I'm going to hit an action column, Add Edit. And it's going to take me to my Add Edit Funding line item. And I'm going to enter, the only data entry is at the bottom of the page, and this is where I'm going to tell the system how much funding I would like to encumber to this specific activity. Remember that this is only the cost of the direct services, not the administration. Administration will be added to the administration activity. For the 2012 renewal grants, your grant year is always going to be 2012. And I'm going to say, according to my scenario, that for this service, I'm entering in. Now, this is what was awarded in the grant for 3 years. You can enter 1 year. Some grantees find that they work with their CPD representative to change funding from year to year. I'm going to hit Save. And you can see I've now funded this activity for $212,970. Now that this is done, I can actually go ahead and draw down funds for reimbursement. I'm going to hit Return to Add Edit Funding. Remember in IDIS to never use your back browser. You'll get an error message and you'll have to log out and log back in. And you can see I've successfully funded this activity at the bottom of the page, and I'm returning to my search. So I've now successfully encumbered funds to one activity. I'm going to now encumber funds to my facility-based housing subsidy assistance activity for the grantee. You can really do this in any order that you like. The grantee was project number 2, and this is activity number 8. Again, I wait for my search criteria to pull up my activity, and under the column, I hit Add Edit. Under the table that says Available Funds, I'm going to double check to ensure that this is all correct. You'll notice that the amount of available funding has decreased, and that's because I've already committed some of the money toward the supportive services activity. Under Action, I'm going to hit Add Edit. I'm now in my Activity Funding Add Edit Funding line item screen. I'm going to enter that funding is coming from grant year 2012, and that for this activity, the budget is $450,000, and hit Save. And I've now successfully encumbered funds to this activity. You'll notice that my available funding has now decreased by that amount as well. I hit Return to Add Edit Funding. I double check that everything here is correct, and return to Search Activities to Fund. And now I'm going to try and fund my administration activities out of the sub-fund. For the project sponsor, this is Activity 6. And it brought up the administration activity. Under Action, I hit Add Edit. And you'll notice one difference here. Under Available Funding, under Fund Type, it now says AD. That means that I am pulling specifically from my AD subfund, and you'll notice that there's only $13,000 available compared to the $100,000 that's available in the entirety of the grant. So I'm going to hit Add Edit. And I'm going to hit my grant year is 2012. And my funded amount, remember, I've only put enough money in this sub-fund for 1 year worth of services. So I'm going to hit just 1 year of funded amount and hit Save. And you can see from my success message that I've successfully encumbered funds to the administration activity for the project sponsor. I hit my Return to Add Edit Funding button. Return to Search Activities to Fund. First, I want to confirm that everything here is correct. I funded the activity for $5,543. Return to Search Activities. And this time, I'm going to fund services for administration for my grantee. And that's activity number 9. Hit Add Edit under Action. And I've returned to the Edit Activity Funding screen. Again, in my Available Funds table, I have my grantee name, my program, and again, I can only pull funds from the AD subfund here. So I go to the column labeled Actions and hit Add Edit. Now I pulled up the Project Sponsor Administration. I apologize. Try that again. Project number 2, activity 9. Okay, see if I look at my table, I now have my grantee, Main Street Housing Corporation Administration, and I hit Add Edit under Action. I double check that all my information is correct, including the fact that I can only pull from the AD subfund. So under Action, I hit Add Edit. Looking at my funding source, I have $7,457 available to commit or encumber. I'm going to be sure that I hit grant year 2012, and I'm going to put $7,000 toward this activity and hit Save. I've got my success message, and I hit Return to Add Edit Funding. And that is how you encumber funding. Just to review, the first thing I did was set up the AD subfund. I did that under the Grants tab. Then I went to the Funding Drawdown tab, and I encumbered funds to 4 activities. My supportive services activity for the project sponsor, administration for the project sponsor, facility-based housing subsidy assistance for my grantee, and administration for my grantee. Remember, there is no funding associated with the project sponsor or grantee reporting activity tab. Switching back to my slides. Now I'm going to talk about drawing down funds. A drawdown is how you request funds in IDIS. Completing a drawdown is a 2-step process. First, one user must create a voucher. Then a separate user must approve the voucher. This is called separation of duties. Remember when you're doing your first drawdown that you do not want the person who has rights to approve the voucher to set it up, or you will have nobody available to approve the voucher. HOPWA requires that you draw down funds at least quarterly, although you can certainly draw down funds more often than that. You cannot start drawing down funds until two things have happened. First, as I mentioned, you must finish encumbering funds to all your direct service activities, including your administration activities. Second, once you have finished encumbering funds, you must email your CPD representative to get approval before you can facilitate your first drawdown. Your CPD representative is going to review your projects and your activities to make sure that the mix of activities you set up and the budgets you encumbered to them match what is in your competitive grant agreement. When you are done encumbering funds, email your CPD representative for approval. If there are any CPD representatives on the phone currently, there is no formal approval form. OHH requests that you at least send an email to approve or disapprove the grantee's request, and that you copy OHH on the email so there is documentation of your review. I also want to draw your attention back to handout number 3. Approving a voucher is the second area where there is a temporary glitch in IDIS. Currently, the button to approve a voucher is disabled. There is, however, a temporary workaround that will allow you to approve vouchers and get reimbursed. I'm going to switch over to UAT and demonstrate this process. Okay, so both creating and approving a voucher takes place in the Funding Drawdown tab. You'll notice on the left side of your screen, you have a navigation area called Drawdowns. To create the voucher, you are going to hit Create Voucher. Creating a voucher is a 4-step process. You'll see that it first takes me to screen number 1. This is page 1 called Create a Voucher. You'll notice that first it has me listed as the grantee. You don't have to use this request lock submission date. You'll notice there are multiple boxes. That's because you can draw down vouchers for multiple activities at one time. You put all of the activities in here, and it will ask you how much you want to draw down for each activity. It then sends it over to locks in one batch, and you will get a check in your bank account 3 days later for all of the money that you've requested for reimbursement. So many grantees will wait till the end of the month, till all their invoices is done, and then request a voucher for all the activities at one time. This is another place where it is helpful if you have tracked your activity ID numbers. If you have not tracked them, if you don't have a list of them, you can hit Search for Activities at the bottom, and you will have to search and write down those numbers. So I'll show you how that's done. I'm now in Search for Activities for Drawdown. I hit my program as HOPWA C and my program year. And I can just hit Search. And it will bring up all of my activities. At this point, it's probably a good idea if you have not tracked your numbers already to do that. And I'm going to hit Select for all of the activities that I want to get reimbursed for. So I'm going to hit for Grantee Administration, Grantee Services, and Supportive Services for the project sponsor. And then I hit Add Selected Activities. And you'll notice that it's now populated with the activity ID numbers. At the top of my page, I'm going to hit Continue to go to page 2. The first thing it's going to do is ask me how much money I want to draw down for the first activity. And I'm going to say $200. And then I can hit Next Activity. And it's now brought up my service activity for facility-based housing. And I'm going to say $1,500 that I want to draw down. My next activity. You can see that it marks my progress at the top. I'm now in activity 3 of 3. This activity is for supportive services, and I can indicate how much I want to draw down for. Let's say $1,000. And now I have a couple options. I can either return to previous activities or I can confirm this voucher. So I'm going to hit Confirm Voucher, and it's going to take me to the third page. At this point, I want to do a thorough review of everything that I've entered to make sure it's correct. So I'm going to look. I have my 3 activities. Are they the activities I wanted to draw funds down? It has my HOPWA program. It tells me what subfund I'm drawing down from, and then I would look at the end also at my amounts. So when I get reimbursed, I'm going to get a total check here for $2,700. So what I'm going to do is hit Generate Voucher. And it's now created a voucher for me. You can see that I have my success message at the top. If I'm unsuccessful, I will get an error message. The Excel spreadsheet that I provided for you yesterday has a way for you to track voucher numbers. What I'm going to want to do is write down my voucher number here. So it's 5448647. The reason is that your second person is now going to have to go into the system and approve the voucher, and it's helpful if you have a series of voucher numbers to give them to go into approve. So the next step before you can get paid is to approve your voucher. Approving vouchers has to be done by the second person, and you'll remember this is the area where we have a current glitch. Generally, in the way it's written in your manual, you would hit Approve Voucher on the left side of your screen under Drawdown. However, that button is disabled, so instead, what you're going to do is hit Search Voucher, and you're going to enter your IDIS voucher number. Make sure it has my correct activity owner, and hit Search. And it's going to bring up my vouchers. These are all of the activities for reimbursement that I have under this voucher number. And then under Action, I'm going to hit Maintain Approve. And I have options here to revise, cancel and view. Yeah, I should have a button to approve the voucher. All right, this probably has to do with the access rights that this has to do with the fact that I created the voucher. So because I'm the same person, I do not have the rights to approve the voucher. It's due to the separation of duty. But your second person will have an action under this column that says Approve. And so at this point, what they're going to do is hit Approve and follow the steps in the screens to be able to approve the voucher. This is what happens if you don't plan accordingly and you have the person who is creating the vouchers trying to approve them at the same time. You won't get the option to do it. But just to review, your person who is going to be approving the vouchers is not going to hit Approve Voucher. They're going to hit Search Voucher. They're going to enter the search criteria to get to the voucher. They're going to get to this screen, and they will have an action item that says Approve. and they will hit that and follow the steps to approve your voucher. Once it's been successfully approved, you'll have 3 days before the check hits your bank account. Okay. We will spend the bulk of our remaining time talking about how to close out your accomplishment year and report performance in IDIS. You will be required to complete performance screens for each activity no later than 90 days after the end of each accomplishment year for your grant. In order to successfully close out your activities, you will need to ensure the following steps are complete. Collect all your invoices, finish drawing down funds for the accomplishment year, work with your project sponsors to collect all of the performance data currently captured in the APR, and if this is the final year of your grant, you would also mark the activity as completed to close it out. Please note that changing the status of an activity from active to completed will release or unencumber any funds associated with that activity. Those funds would become available to encumber to another service. Excuse me. One of the enhancements that HUD has made to the IDIS screens is to update the data elements in the accomplishment pathways to include all of the data you currently collect for the most recent version of the APR. In each of the direct services activities, you will be completing output data, including households served and leveraged households. These data elements are currently captured in Part 3 and Part 5 of your APR. You will also be asked to include outcome data, such as end-of-the-year housing stability information, currently captured in Part 4 of your APR. In the reporting activities, you will be adjusting for duplication, reporting agency and jurisdiction-wide data, such as leveraged resources, and reporting aggregate data, such as beneficiary information and access to care outcomes. Remember that reporting activities are designed to allow you to continue collecting data from your clients and your project sponsors in the same format. The Office of HIV/AIDS Housing has built into IDIS what we call data checks. These are areas where data entered by the grantee must meet a specific requirement or the system will not allow you to save your data. For example, if you report that you served 25 households with HOPWA-funded TBRA vouchers, you will also be asked to provide outcome information detailing the housing status of those households at the end of the year. You should be familiar with these questions from Part 4 of your APR. You must report all 25 households as either continuing in the program at the end of the year or exiting to a specific location such as private housing. If you have not entered an outcome destination for exactly 25 households in this example, IDIS will give you an error message. We will not be discussing all of the data checks today. However, your IDIS user manual has a troubleshooting section for each of the activities. If you get an error message from any of the data checks, your manual should help you to figure out the best way to resolve the problem. I am now going to demonstrate how to complete the accomplishment screens using the activities we set up for our grantee and our project sponsor yesterday. Remember, as I switch over to the UAT demonstration, let Becky know in the discussion area if you are having trouble viewing. So if you remember, all projects and activities are under the Plans, Projects, and Activities tab. So I'm going to click that. Yesterday, when we set up the activities, you may remember we needed to set up the direct services activities first because the reporting activities pull information directly from the services activities. This is true for the accomplishment screens as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter search criteria, and I'm going to start with my grantee with their facility-based housing, and that's activity 8. You can see as we move through today's exercises how important it is to track your activity and project ID numbers. I'm going to hit search, and I'm going to double check that it's brought up the correct activity. Under action, I'm going to hit edit. And I'm going to check to make sure this information is correct. You'll remember that Main Street Housing Corporation is actually Calcutta House doing business as. I have my activity ID number, my correct program year, and my name. This screen is called the Edit Activity screen. It is a common screen for all CPD, and it is my main navigation page. When I talked about changing the status of an activity from active to closed, it's here that I would do that. I can mark an activity as open, completed, or canceled. We'll talk more about that later. So yesterday, when I was setting up my activities under the HOPWA line, you'll notice that I had only option was for me to edit HOPWA or to add HOPWA as a setup detail. I now have the option to add accomplishment details. It's under the column labeled accomplishment, and I'm going to hit this button. I'm going to look in my gray area and make sure that this is the correct activity, and I'm going to enter in my accomplishment year. For the first year of my grant, it's going to be 2012. The first question is final data for annual report. This question should not be answered or switched to yes until I've completed everything. What this is going to do is let HUD know that my report is ready for review. So you don't want to hit yes until you've entered everything in and you're completely sure that you want to submit your performance data for the end of the year. I have a space for my accomplishment narrative. There's information in your manual and in the handouts from yesterday under, I think it was handout 2, about information that should go in your narrative. But essentially, all of the information that you're currently including in your narrative for your APR should go here, including your successes, your barriers, how well you did it at meeting your targets, if you went over how you did that, any technical assistance you need, anything you want HUD to know. So the first question it's going to ask me is, how many households did I serve with HOPWA funds? I believe yesterday I said my target was 30 households, so I'm going to say I served 30 households. The next question is under all of your housing subsidy assistance activities. That would be TBRA, facility-based housing subsidy assistance, facility development if the unit opened during the year, TBRA, sorry, I said TBRA, PHP, and StrumU. And it's asking, of the households that were served with HOPWA-funded facility-based housing subsidy assistance, how many households also received HOPWA-funded case management services from this same project sponsor during the year? This question, you'll see, goes into our reporting activities, and what it's doing is it's going to help us come up with a cohort of clients that you are going to be capturing access to care outcome data on. This is one of the new elements in the APR in Section 4. Now, in our scenario, this project, the grantee was not funded for case management, but I would like to show you how this works. So I'm going to say 5 households there. If your project sponsor is only funded for housing subsidy assistance, you are going to leave that blank. This is only for project sponsors or grantees that are providing both the housing subsidy assistance and the case management. Next, it's going to ask me how many households I served with leverage funding. I'll enter a number. How many actual number of units by bedroom, and you remember there was a planned number of units in your setup detail. And now it's going to ask me about households and expenditures. And this is one of those areas where there's a data check. I entered 30 households, so I need to have 30 households listed. This information comes from Part 5 of your APR. And I'm going to say I spent $150,000 on this. And then down here, I have my exit information, which comes from Part 4 of my APR. How many of the households were continuing? I'm going to say 25. And how many exited, and where did they exit to? This is another place where there's a data check. At the bottom, you'll see there are two questions that have to do with funding drawn, and only one of them is a data entry field. The first field, where it says total funds drawn to date, are going to pull from IDIS all of the drawdowns that you have made. However, because your performance screens are due 90 days after the end of your grant, it is possible that that could include drawdowns that were made in a new accomplishment year. So the second question, total funds drawn during this program year, it should actually say total funds drawn during this accomplishment year. It's a typographical error. You want to enter how much you spent on this activity during your accomplishment year. I'm going to say $150,000. And this is new to IDIS. It's not in your APR, actually, but you're now going to be asked questions about your compliance with lead-based paint requirements. And if I say that my house was built before 1978, I'll be required to say what I've done to assess risk and deal with any problems. And I'm going to hit save. Now I have a success screen up here. If I have not met one of the data checks, I will get error messages. And as I've told you, you can refer to your manual, and it has a troubleshooting section for each specific type of activity that will help you navigate how to fix the error messages. I'm now back to the Edit Activity screen, and you'll see a new button came up, Completion Check. And I'm going to hit that, and it's going to tell me if I've met all of my requirements. And it now says that I've completed all of my pathways. At this point, and we're going to talk about that in the next screens, I can start my new accomplishment year if I would like to. So the next activity that I'm going to add accomplishment screens for is the case management. It's the next service activity, which was supportive services. So I'm going to go to the left of my screen under Activity and hit Search, and then enter in criteria for program year 2012. And because I've been tracking this, I know that it's my project sponsor is Project ID 1, and supportive services is activity number 5. And I wait for the search results. I double check that all of my information is correct. And under the column labeled Action, I hit Edit. I'm back to the Edit Activity Navigation page. So I'm going to double check that all of my information is correct. And I'm going to go to the column labeled Accomplishments and hit Add HOPWA C. And I'm going to double check that my gray area is correct. I'm going to enter my accomplishment year for the first year as 2012. Remember, I do not change final data for annual report to yes until I've completed everything. I would enter in my accomplishment narrative. And this table should look familiar to you as well. It's in, I believe, Part 5 of your APR. You are going to list the number of households that you served for each type of supportive service and the HOPWA expenditures. Remember that these are specifically households served with HOPWA funds and HOPWA funds expended not leveraged funds. We've had a couple people confused about that on the APR, the paper-based APR. So make sure that you have that clearly in your head for the IDIS screens. So for this purpose, I'm going to say the project sponsor was funded for case management and that they served 30 households. And one of the data, I believe this is a data error, if I enter households without expenditures and hit save, and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is a data check error message, and it says HOPWA funds expended must be entered when a number of households is populated. This is an example of a data check. And what it's saying is, if I listed that 30 households were served, I need to indicate how much HOPWA money I spent on those services. So I'm going to enter in, I forgot what my budget was for this for the first year, but I'll just enter in $10,000. You'll notice that the total is automatically populated at the bottom when I click off. And we have an additional question to answer. And this, again, goes back to helping us populate our access to care cohort table. Of those households served with HOPWA-funded case management, how many households also received HOPWA-funded housing subsidy assistance? And that includes TBRA, Strong U, PHP, facility-based housing subsidy assistance, and master leasing from this same project sponsor. And because they weren't funded for housing subsidy assistance, I'm going to put 0. It's going to list my total funds drawn to date, including any drawdowns I've made after the accomplishment year ended. And I'm going to say that I spent $10,000, and remember, it should say drawn during this accomplishment year there. And I'm going to hit save. And I've cleared up my error message now, and I've gotten my success message that I successfully saved my accomplishment screens. I hit check HOPWA C under completion check. And I get a success message, so I'm ready to start my next accomplishment year with my supportive services. Now I'm going to enter my accomplishment screens for my admin activities. And admin accomplishment screens are only how much money did you spend. So at the start of the year, you say, I've budgeted $5,000 for project sponsor administration. At the end of the year, you say how much you spent. So I'm going to do my search by entering in criteria. And in this case, I'm going to show you what happens if you don't know your project ID and activity number. You just can enter in HOPWA C in your program year, hit search, and it will bring up everything you've entered. For your first accomplishment year and your first grant, it's not a big deal because there are not that many of these to search through. But after years and years, many grantees have pages and pages of information to sort through. So I'm going to start with my grantee administration, and I'm going to go to Activity 9 and go over to the right of my screen under Action and hit Edit. And I'm back to my Edit Activity Navigation page. So I'm going to scroll down to my HOPWA C line, and under Accomplishments, hit Add HOPWA C. And I'm going to look at my gray area and make sure that I have pulled up the appropriate information. I'm going to enter an accomplishment year. I am not going to switch final data for annual report to yes until I'm done with everything. And here I have a grantee accomplishment narrative. And since this is the grantee administration activity, this is where you would enter in information about how you've distributed funds, anything that's general for the jurisdiction or for the agency about how well you implemented the program. So if you want to tell HUD that your program is designed in such a way that 90% of folks stay housed at the end of the year, this is where you would stay that. And as I mentioned, the only data entry field is how much funding did I draw down, and again with the typo, during this accomplishment year. So I believe this was funded for $7,000, so I'll say I drew down $7,000 and hit save. And I get my success message. So I'm going to go back to my activity search screen by hitting search under activity on the left side of my screen. And now I'm going to enter in my accomplishments for my Case Management Associates Administration activity. I'm going to enter in search criteria and hit search. And I'm going to scroll down and search for this particular activity, number 6. And under action, I'm going to hit edit. And I'm back to my activity main navigation page. So I scroll down to the HOPWA C line, and under accomplishment, I hit add HOPWA C accomplishment. I review the information in my gray area to make sure it's correct. Enter an accomplishment year. I would add an accomplishment narrative for the administration for this project sponsor. And again, the only other data entry is how much funding did this project sponsor use for administration during the accomplishment year. And I'm going to say $5,000. And I'll hit save. And I have my success message. Yesterday when we set up all of our activities, you remember the order that we set them up in was direct services, then project sponsor, and then the grantee was the final. The grantee reporting was the final setup that we did. You are going to enter your accomplishments in the same exact order. So now I've entered in accomplishments for facility-based housing subsidy assistance, supportive services, and my 2 administration activities. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in my my accomplishment screens for the project sponsor reporting. Again, I go to search under activity on the left side of my screen. And I'm going to start with my project sponsor. I enter in my search criteria. And it really doesn't matter at this point if I enter in my grantee or my project sponsor first, as long as I'm entering in project sponsor reporting accomplishments before I enter in grantee reporting accomplishments. Okay. So I'm going to look for my project sponsor CMA, and I'm going to go to the project sponsor reporting activity, which is number 7, and hit it edit under action. And I'm back to my edit activity main page. So I double check all my information is correct. And in the HOPWA C row, in the column labeled accomplishment, I hit the button. And you remember that starting off your project sponsor reporting and your grantee reporting is a little bit different than the way you started off your supportive services. The first thing you want to do is enter in your accomplishment year and then hit save. And it will pull up additional questions for you to answer. The first is your narrative. And these tables should look familiar to you. The first one is your housing subsidy assistance actual accomplishment adjustment for duplication. This is information that you should be used to collecting. It's reported in Part 5 of your APR. What we're being asked here is if you have a project sponsor who is funded for more than one type of housing subsidy assistance. And remember, an example would be if you have a project sponsor or you yourself as the grantee have funding for permanent housing placement and for TBRA. And you use your permanent housing placement to move people in for the TBRA program. That would be an adjustment for duplication. You have the same thing for your leveraged funds. What this is going to do, and it'll make more sense in a minute, is actually pulls over data that you entered in your housing subsidy assistance activities. That is why you need to complete them first. In this case, the Case Management Associates was only funded for supportive services, and so there's nothing to pull over. That's why you see all zeros. The only data entry line in this table is the adjustment for duplication. And since this project sponsor wasn't funded for these services, I'm going to leave that blank. The next thing we're going to do is enter in our sources of leveraging, and this should also look familiar to you. I believe it's part 2 or 3 of your APR. And you can enter in, it gives you some examples of places there you may have leveraged funding. So I can say, for example, that I leveraged Ryan White Case Management at $25,000. And when I click off, it will automatically populate the total at the bottom. If I need to add something else, I can hit the button Add Other Public, and it will add another line for me to enter information on. So I can say I had $25,000 for housing subsidy assistance, and you can enter another program in. Make sure that if you enter other, that you type in something in the line. I have space for private funding, other funding including grantee or project sponsor cash contributions, as well as resident rent payments. Something that you should note is that this is resident rent payments made specifically out of a TBRA program to a private landlord. If you are running a facility-based facility and you're collecting resident rent as part of the program, that would be considered program income and would be reported in the table below. So the next 2 tables deal with program income and resident rent payments made directly into a HOPWA program. There are no data checks on this, so I could enter in $2,000. The only thing you might want to be careful of is that you can't hold program income over a number of years and earn interest on it. So if you enter in $2,000, unless you collected it in the last several months of your grant, you should probably have some sort of expenditure listed. And now we have the start of the tables being populated for total possible households for your access to care. And again, because this project sponsor didn't have any housing subsidy assistance, it's not populated. So I'll review this table in a minute when we get to our project sponsor reporting for the grantee. One note, if you are a grantee that delivered direct services and you were going to be filling out both your project sponsor and your grantee reporting, you should report your sources of leveraging in your grantee reporting tab and leave this one blank. So for this particular activity, I've completed what I need to, and I'm going to push save. I know these reporting activities can be really confusing, so if you have questions about them, you can email me later, but also look in your manual because there's step-by-step instructions on how to complete all of this, and they've been included in your handouts that you can download off the left side of your screen, and I believe it's handout 4 that details this, or exercise 4. Okay, so I have my success screen. So the next thing I'm going to do is my project sponsor reporting activity for my grantee. So I'm going to hit search under activity on the left side of my screen. I'm going to enter in my search criteria and hit search. And this time I'm going to look for my MSHC project sponsor reporting, activity 10. Under the action column, I hit edit. Now I'm in my common edit activity screen. I double check my information, scroll down to HOPWA C, and hit the button in the column under accomplishments. And again, I need to enter in my accomplishment year for the first year and hit save before my questions come up. And I'm going to scroll down, and now these tables should make more sense to you. You can see that it pulled directly from my facility-based housing subsidy assistance activity. So it knows that I now entered in that I've served 30 households with HOPWA funds and 20 households for leverage funds. If my project sponsor or my grantee had adjustment for duplication between these different types of activities, you would enter it in here, and you'll see that when I click off, it subtracts from the total to give me an unduplicated client count for this project sponsor. My sources of leveraging, and remember, if I'm a grantee, and in this case this is the grantee activity, I'm going to leave this blank and enter my leveraging under my grantee reporting activity. Same with program income. Now I'm down to my total possible households to be used in access to care. And you'll notice this table has automatically populated. And what it did is it automatically populated my 30 households that I said I served. However, you'll remember the question that said, how many households did the project sponsor serve, both with case management and housing subsidy assistance? And even though in my scenario I had this grantee is only doing housing subsidy assistance, I said I was going to enter in a total of 5 so I could show you how it worked. Well, look what the system did. It entered 5 under the column that says number of households that received housing subsidy assistance and HOPWA funded case management. And then it subtracted that 5 from the total that received housing subsidy assistance only. So between the 2 columns, I have my total of 30 households that I served. And so my adjustment for duplication is between these 2 columns. And what my adjustment should equal, if I scroll up, is this same 5 households up here. So when I'm done between the 2 columns, I should have a total of 25 households. So I'm going to say 3 received duplicative housing subsidy assistance only, and 2 got both case management and housing subsidy assistance. And when I click off, you see my total is 25. This table is probably really confusing, so I would definitely check my manual and contact me if you have any questions. If it comes up as a frequently asked question, we'll write something down and send it to you via email. But essentially what I'm doing here is trying to figure out the unduplicated household count that this project sponsor will be reporting access to care outcomes on. So if you're the grantee and you're the only one doing services, or the project sponsor, you know how many households you capture access to care data on. You've been doing it for years, so you know how many you have to. It's just a matter of figuring out how to enter it in the table. So don't get daunted by it. You know who you're reporting access to care outcomes on. You just want to know where to put them in this table. I'm going to hit save. And I get my success message. So the last thing I have to do to finish up my accomplishment screen is to do my grantee reporting activity. And you've probably guessed the way I get to it is I go to the activity underneath and hit search underneath activity on the left side of my screen. I enter in my search criteria. And I go to the top one, activity ID number 11, and hit edit. And I'm back to my edit activity common screen. So I scroll down to my accomplishment column, in the row HOPWA C and hit the button. I check my gray area to make sure that this is correct, and I enter in my accomplishment year for the first year and hit Save. And like the project sponsor reporting screen, it's going to pull up information that it's pulling specifically from my project sponsor reporting activities. This is the reason why it's so important that your project sponsor reporting activities are done first, because the grantee reporting activity is the last step. So for example, in the first table, you have housing subsidy assistance, actual goals, adjustment for duplication. The first line says housing subsidy assistance, goal adjustment for duplication for all sponsors. So in all of your project sponsors, you have entered in the unduplicated count of client households served by the project sponsor in PBRA, PHP, Facility-Based Housing Subsidy Assistance, and SHRM-U. What the system is going to do is pull over all of the numbers from all of the project sponsor activities that you have entered to come up with a total number for your whole grant. What you're being asked to do now is to adjust for duplication between project sponsors. So using a similar example, you have a project sponsor who is funded for permanent housing placement. They use their dollars to support another agency's clients who have TBRA vouchers. So you know that all of the permanent housing placement was also clients who received TBRA from another agency. I would enter that adjustment for duplication in this row. It's the only data entry field. If you do not have this information or you don't have multiple project sponsors funded for housing subsidy assistance, you can leave that blank. And the same thing is supposed to happen in the supportive services. Supportive services households to be assisted with HOPWA funds. It doesn't seem to have pulled over from my supportive services activity, so this may be another one of those HOPWA glitches. As a note, all of these screens were built from scratch to try and match the APR notes, and you can imagine it was a very big task, and there's a lot of coding and programming that went behind the scenes. We expect that grantees will find these glitches. That's why we have a transition year. For the first year of your grant, you will be doing both an APR on paper and these screens. As you're noting these, and we'll talk about this in a minute, as you're finding these glitches, we need your help to email and help us to document them so that we can fix them along the way. Again, this would be an adjustment for duplication between project sponsors. So if you had one project sponsor funded for case management and another one who was funded for transportation, and you know that they're the same clients, you would enter the adjustment here. And I'll show you because it does allow you to do negative numbers, but you can enter it here, and it will automatically populate there. The total and the bottom line, sorry. As the grantee, I would enter my sources of leveraging in the Grantee tab. And you'll notice it automatically populates. This grantee had facility-based housing, so what I would expect to see some sort of program income and some sort of expenditure. All right, so as you scroll down, all of the information that you're currently capturing, I believe in Part 2 of your APR, beneficiary data, homeless data, age and gender, race and ethnicity, area median income, it's all captured, and access to care outcomes are all captured in the Grantee Reporting tab. Now, the reason we did it here was as the grantee, it will allow you to collect this information in aggregate in the way that you're doing now. So if you, for example, have your project sponsors fill out a separate APR and then you add it all together, you can still do that, and you just have to enter it one time here. So I'm not going to enter all these numbers. This is one of those areas where there are a lot of data checks. You're familiar with all of them. They're the same data checks that currently you may get emails from us at CSI as part of the data verification process. But I do want to go through some of the elements and point out where some changes were made in the last version of the APR. The first is in the beneficiary table, individuals and families served with housing subsidy assistance. You will notice there's now a line that says number of all other persons diagnosed as HIV positive. I want to make a point that you are not required to get HIV verification from family members and beneficiaries. This question was added as a result of comments made by grantees who indicated that they often know that there's a positive partner in the house, and that they wanted to be able in their reports to say that for every HIV positive person served through HOPWA, there are 4 other clients that are positive that get benefits. You only enter the ones that you know of here. Do use confidentiality, and you are not, I repeat, not required to get HIV verification from family members and partners. If you don't know the status, or if you know they're negative, you're going to enter them in the next line, all other persons without HIV. If you have any questions about that, please let us know. The next is prior living situation. And the data check here is going to be the person in the table above, the person with HIV/AIDS who qualified the household for housing subsidy assistance. This is the head of household. Did they continue from the prior operating year? And if not, where did they come from? Where were they living before they entered HOPWA? The first rows 2 through 4 are from homelessness, and row 5 will total those together. And so you'll have an idea of who your homeless clients were when they came in, how many of them. And the data check is that the total as it populates on the bottom must equal, I'm going to go ahead and show you how this works. So I have 30 households here. I have to have 30 households entered from up here somewhere, or I'm going to get an error message. So the total down here is 30. I should not get an error message when I save. The next table is homeless individual summary. And this is the one and only place in the whole IDIS system where there is a question asked that is not in your APR. And it's the last question. Of the total number of HOPWA eligible individuals served with housing subsidy assistance, enter the number who are homeless with children under the age of 18. This question, HOPWA, is currently not required in that you can save if it's not there. OHH added it for 2 reasons, really. One is they are trying to get data elements in line with HMIS, not because there's a requirement for you to use HMIS, but there are systems where HMIS is used for the HOPWA program, but also because there's a focus in the HUD national strategy on assisting clients to get out of homelessness. And this is one way that we can track the number of children that have been assisted, whose families have been assisted out of homelessness, or are coming into the program from homelessness. So if you're not currently capturing this, OHH would encourage you to start capturing it, but it is not currently a required data element. I will tell you that last time I did this training, there was a glitch in this table as well, in that the only data check for this table should be that you can't enter more homeless clients than you reported coming from homelessness in prior living situation. So if I said 5 clients were coming from homelessness, I shouldn't be able to enter more than 5 clients in the homeless individual summary in any given line. However, I believe it's limiting you, that it's data checking the total line and not letting you enter more than 5 total. Let's see. I hit save. Homeless cannot be greater. Yes. So this is what data checks look like. and it's giving me data check error messages because I have nothing entered in some of the tables below. Whenever you find an error, such as the one in the homeless individual summary, where it's not letting you enter information that you would normally enter, just be sure to write it in your narrative. So if I served, for example, 5 eligible individuals who are chronically homeless, as well as 5 who had children who were coming from homelessness, since it won't let me save, just enter 5 in one table and indicate in your narrative that you also had 5 chronically homeless clients. Your age and gender chart has some differences. These were differences that came out in the last APR. The first is that you're being asked to separate your HOPWA eligible individuals from your beneficiaries. You also have a place to indicate if a client identifies as transgender. Because I entered 30 households up here, or 30 head of household individuals, and 30 beneficiaries, I need to have 30 down here somewhere. So I'm just going to hit a column. Same with race and ethnicity. I have to have 30 individuals. The data check for both age and gender and race and ethnicity is total beneficiaries. My area median income chart, and this is going to data check with total head of households. And now I'm back to access to care. And I have a new table. This is how I'm going to get to my total cohort of clients that should be reported for access to care. And you'll notice it pulled over from my project sponsor reporting. So my adjustment for duplication is between project sponsors. And now I know that I should enter 26 households here for every line. Well, I have a cohort of 26. I want to report what happened to those 26 for access to care. You should be used to access to care from, I believe, Part 4 of your APR. And I'm going to use that same cohort to report total number of households that obtained an income-producing job. And then I hit save. Yay, and I got a success message. So what it means is that I clarified all of those error messages. Again, I would encourage you to use your technical assistance resources if you have questions as you move through here, as well as your user manual, as we have troubleshooting sections to help you clarify data error messages. So now that I've done my grantee reporting, I have completed all of my accomplishment screens. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow and talk to you about how you start the new year. Just as a reminder, I did my accomplishment screens for my direct services activities first. Then I did both of my project sponsor reporting activities, and I finished up with my grantee reporting activity. If my data is all correct and I'm happy with it, I'm now going to go back and switch that question about final data ready for reporting to yes, and I'm going to send an email both to HOPWA@HUD.gov and to my CPD representative to let them know that my accomplishment screens are ready for review. So now that you've completed your accomplishment screens, we will review how to start your next accomplishment year. To start any new accomplishment year, you will need to answer some fundamental questions. First, are there any new agencies providing HOPWA-funded services on your grant? If so, you will need to set up a new project for that agency. If the mix of agencies remain the same, you will not need to make any changes to your projects in your second year. Next, will any agencies be providing new services? If so, you will need to set up a new activity to associate with the agency's project in IDIS. Finally, will any agencies be discontinuing services in the second year? If so, you will need to follow the steps we detailed to completing an activity. Remember, this includes collecting all invoices, completing all drawdowns, completing all accomplishment screens, and changing the status of the activity from open to completed. If you are not making any changes in the year to activities that your organizations will be implementing, the only thing you will need to do to start off your new year is to establish a new accomplishment year and set new targets within the activities you have already created in year one. At this point, you should be familiar from yesterday's webinar with how to set up a project and create activities. So now I'm going to go back to UAT and demonstrate only those features that are new to you, specifically how to create a new accomplishment year for activities that will be continuing in year two, and how to close out activities that are discontinued or ending. So I'm going to go back to IDIS, and I'm going to go to Activity, and I'm going to hit Search. And in this situation, I'm going to say that the grantee is going to continue facility-based housing in the second year. So I'm going to search for, I'm going to enter my search criteria, enter in search, and I'm going to go to my activity number 8 for facility-based housing and hit Edit under Action. And I'm going to go to the setup detail because I'm starting a new year. Remember, setup details at the start of the year, accomplishments are at the end. I'm going to hit Edit HOPWA C. And at the top of the screen, you'll notice a button that says Add Another Year. So I'm going to hit that. If you look in the gray area, you'll notice that it's the same activity. It's got the same activity ID number. It's got the same title, the same project title. It's the same owner. But all of my targets that I established in the first year are now blank. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter in my accomplishment year for the second year. The first year was 2012, so my next accomplishment year would be 2013. And I'm going to enter in my annual budget. Remember, this is for one accomplishment year, one 12-month period. I'm going to enter how many households that I propose to serve with HOPWA funding and how many households I propose to serve with leveraged funding. The total number of planned units by bedroom. I would identify any subrecipients here by hitting Select Organization. And remember, for facility-based housing, an example of a subrecipient would be a lawn care company or a maintenance firm that you've contracted out to help, and they receive HOPWA funding. I'm going to look for my performance objective and performance outcome. And remember, these are common across all of the setup screens, across all CPD. They default to provide decent, affordable housing and affordability, and they align with the consolidated plan goals. For the competitive program, you're most likely going to use the default. And you'll see that it also kept my household as a permanent project-based rental assistance. If my facility type or my housing type has changed, then I would change it there. And it automatically populated the whole bottom of my screen. It left my answers for, is the site owned by a public entity? Was it a capital development project funded by HOPWA and placed into service during the year? And it left my address, and it remains checked as confidential. So I'm going to hit Save. And it takes me back to my Edit Activity page. And I want to show you something. If I scroll down and I hit Edit Activity, Under Setup Detail, I hit Edit HOPWA C again. You will notice under Proposed Accomplishments, I now have a drop-down box. This all appears still under the same activity. However, I can navigate between accomplishment year pathways by using this drop-down box. So I can go back and look at 2012 if I want by selecting that year, or I can go to 2013 by selecting that year. If you are funding the same organizations and the same activities for all 3 years, you will use the same projects and activities and have 3 different accomplishment years within them. This is definitely another area where you want to use your tracking sheet to indicate that you're using it for multiple accomplishment years. But it definitely makes data entry easier from year to year if you're funded for the same projects and activities from year to year. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to do this for every activity. I just want to show you once. And as a reminder to add another year, you would open up the activity, go to the column labeled Setup Detail, hit Edit HOPWA C, hit Add Another Year at the top, and then enter your new accomplishment year and your new targets. Hit Save. And now I have 3 accomplishment years listed for this same activity. When I want to enter my accomplishments, I go to the accomplishment page. It brings up 2012. I would do the same thing, add another year. And I would hit 2013. I'm going to cancel out of it in the interest of time. This is also detailed in your manual. At the end of your grant, or if you're discontinuing services, the way that you would close an activity is by changing this from open to complete and entering the date that you closed it. I'm not sure. Sometimes it won't let you do that if you haven't done any drawdowns. Yeah. So it's not going to let me save it because I haven't done any drawdowns on this activity. Instead, it would ask me to cancel the activity. But once you've gone through your entire grant year, you've done drawdowns, you've entered in all of your accomplishment screens, when the activity is ready to be closed, you change it to completed and you enter the completion date. Remember, though, that you don't want to do this until you've finished drawing down funds on the activity and you've completed your accomplishment screens. If there are any remaining funds encumbered to the activity when you close it, they become unencumbered, and they go back to your whole grant. So if you had $5,000 left on this activity, you completed the activity, the $5,000 would go back to the balance on your grant. Okay. Okay, so that's starting your new accomplishment year. I want to spend a little bit of time going over your annual requirements. Now we are going to review what your requirements in IDIS will be by accomplishment year. This slide has a lot of information on it so that you can use it later as a reference tool. This is your roadmap to navigating IDIS for all 3 years of your 2012 renewal grant. At the start of year 1, you will determine first which agencies will be implementing the HOPWA grant and what services you will be funding at each agency. To start out the year, you will first set up one new project for every project sponsor and one for the grantee. Once the projects are set up, you will associate activities for each of these projects, including direct services, administration, and reporting activities. The mix of activities you choose should match those approved in your grant agreement. You will first set up all direct service activities, then all project sponsor reporting activities, and finally the grantee reporting activity. After you complete setup, you will encumber funds to the direct services and administration activities. Remember, there are no funds associated with reporting activities. Once you have completed setting up targets and funding the activity, email your HUD CPD representative to get final approval. You will not be able to get reimbursed for services until your CPD representative gives his or her approval. For the 12-month accomplishment period, you will complete your activities and draw down funds according to the guidelines in your grant agreement. You must draw down funds at least one time per quarter. At the end of the year, you will do a paper-based APR and complete the performance screens in IDIS. This will allow us to identify and correct all of those glitches in IDIS and to ensure that all grantees understand how to accurately enter their data into the system. You will start year 2 by determining for each project sponsor and for the grantee which activities will continue into year 2, which will be discontinued, and which new activities will be started in year 2. Using the projects you established in year 1, you will set up new accomplishment years for activities continuing from year 1, close out activities that will be discontinued, and set up new activities for all new services. If a new project sponsor is funded in year 2, you will need to set up a new project for them and then attach activities to the new project. Remember, all activities should be approved by HUD in your grant agreement. Once the activity structure is in place for the year, you can make changes to funds encumbered for each direct service or administration activity. Once the activity is funded at the correct level, email your HUD CPD representative for final approval. Complete your accomplishment year, drawing down funds as appropriate, and unless otherwise directed by HUD, for your second year, you would report annual performance using IDIS only. Year 3 will start the same way as year 2. Determine for each project sponsor and for the grantee which activities will continue into year 3, which will be discontinued, and which new activities will be started up in year 3. Using the projects you established in year 1, you will set up a new accomplishment year for activities that are continuing from year 2. Close out activities that will be discontinued, and set up new activities for new services. Again, if a new project sponsor is funded, you will need to set up a new project for them and then attach activities to that new project. And once again, all activities should be approved by HUD in your grant agreement. Once the activity structure is in place for the year, ensure that encumbered funds for each direct service or administration activity is correct, and email your HUD CPD representative for final approval. Complete your accomplishment year, drawing down funds as appropriate. The main difference between year 2 and year 3 is how you close out your activities in IDIS. Follow the guidelines that are currently in your grant agreement. If less than 10% of your grant funds remain, close out all activities in the system by changing their status from open to completed. This will unencumber funds so that you can use them in conjunction with any renewal funds awarded by HUD. The IDIS system will allow you to fund an activity from multiple grants. If more than 10% of your funds remain, you will need to submit a written request for an extension to your HUD CPD representative. If you do not do this, your funding may be recaptured by HUD. Unless otherwise directed by HUD, grantees who do not need an extension should report annual performance within 90 days of the end of their grant year using IDIS only. I want to highlight a slight change in the guidance here. If you are granted an extension on your grant for a period of 90 days or less, so your extension is for 3 months or less, you will not report those accomplishments separately. include all of the expenditures and performance data for your extension period in your final report due within 90 days at the end of the original accomplishment year. This is only applicable if your extension is for 90 days or less. If the extension is granted for more than 90 days, you will again need to determine which services will be continuing and which will be discontinued. For those services that are continuing, you will establish a fourth accomplishment year within the relevant activities. Once you have completed the setup process and have encumbered funds for the applicable activities, again, you will email your HUD CPD representative for approval. You would complete services for the term of the extension period, drawing down funds as appropriate, and finally, you would report performance for all open activities using the fourth accomplishment year pathway you created at the beginning of the year. At the end of the extension period, to close out the grant, change the status of the activities from open to completed. So my suggestion is to use those slides, even print them out and put them with your manual, as they're a roadmap on how you're going to use IDIS for the next 3 to 4 years. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about some of the other functions available to you in IDIS. These are primarily located in some of the IDIS tabs we have not talked much about up to this point. These functions were created to assist you in better managing your grant. The first function we want to discuss are the MicroStrategy reports. HUD has created some shared reports that you can download and use to monitor certain aspects of your grant. Although these shared reports can be accessed through IDIS, they are actually located in a separate hosting platform called MicroStrategy. Currently, there are over 90 shared reports in MicroStrategy. However, only 4 of them are relevant to the HOPWA program. They are listed here. The PR01 report lists all of HUD's grants and programs associated with a grantee by type and year. This is a good report to use if you have multiple types of HUD awards. It will help you list all of them and keep the funding straight. The PR02 report lists all activities and projects by program year for a grantee. This is a very useful report for grantees because it allows you to keep track of everything you've entered, how much money you have left in each activity, and whether the activity is active or completed. You could use this report, for example, if you need to figure out if you have successfully closed all of your activities at the end of the grant, or to determine how well your project sponsors are spending their funds. The PR05 report lists all of your drawdowns by voucher number. This is a good way to get an overall list of your vouchers. And finally, the PR90 report will eventually allow you to pull your own performance profile once you have entered performance data at the end of the accomplishment year. These are the reports that you may have seen on HUD HRE. Right now, the PR90 report has some glitches in it, mostly related to formatting. But by the time you enter your accomplishment data for the first year, it should be fully functional. I'm going to show you how to access MicroStrategy, but do not plan on spending too much time pulling actual reports. Sometimes the reports are slow to download, and it is not a good use of your time to wait for the data extraction. I do want to point out, however, that at the end of this presentation and in your user manual, you will find a link to a separate user manual on how to use MicroStrategy reporting system. If you have a question about how to use MicroStrategy, be sure to download that manual. So you will notice at the top of your screen, we've used the Plans, Projects, and Activities tab, Funding and Drawdown, Grant. The last 4 tabs are the tabs we haven't used. MicroStrategy Reports is located in the last one, labeled Reports. I'm going to click on that. And I hit View Reports mostly because UAT is set up a little bit differently than it is in IDIS production. When you hit reports in IDIS production, this is the next screen that you will see. And you'll see that it opened up a new window in my browser. That's because it's taken me to this new hosting platform, MicroStrategy.
Hey, Amy?
Yes.
We can still see your slideshow. Can you switch to applications?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Let me start that again so you guys can see. Does everybody see IDIS now? Becky, can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so what I've done is I've clicked on the last tab, Reports. And in this case, under the report navigation on the left, I'm going to hit View Reports. But in IDIS production, this is the next screen that you will see when you hit Reports. And you'll notice that it opened up a new browser, a new tab in my browser. And I'm now in the MicroStrategy hosting system. So I'm going to hit IDIS here. And you'll see I have a list of options. The only one that really works for the HOPWA program right now are the shared reports. So I'm going to hit that. And this is the list of 90 reports that I told you about. And you'll notice that most of them are named for home programs or other programs, not the HOPWA program. The only ones that are currently active for HOPWA is the PR90 at the bottom and some of the general reports at the top. To actually pull a report, I would hit the report that I want to pull, and I would hit whether I can hit this or I can export it. If I export it, it comes out in an Excel spreadsheet, and for me, I find it's the easiest way. And it's going to ask me to enter certain criteria. I have to keep hitting the plus button, and eventually it's going to allow me only to pull over my personal information as a grantee. I'm going to enter the valid year. If I leave it blank, it'll pull for all years, and actually I find that to be the most useful. And I'm going to tell it that I want to pull over for the HOPWA program. And when I'm done, I would hit export, and it would export the information. So now I'm going to hit cancel. And the way I navigate through MicroStrategy is through these links here. So right now I'm in the PRO2. I can go back to shared reports. And again, the four that are most useful to the HOPWA program are PRO1, PRO2, PRO5, and PR90 at the bottom. And for now, that's all I'm going to show you in MicroStrategies. I just want you to be aware it's there. And you'll probably use the PRO2 report the most frequently. Okay. The Grant tab allows you to pull up a history of your grant. It will tell you how much money you were originally allocated for a specific grant, how much you have encumbered to activities, and how much you have spent so far. HUD uses this tab a lot to see where you are in your expenditures. And I just want to show you what it looks like quickly. If I hit the Grant tab, I'm going to enter in search criteria and hit search. And it pulls up my grants. Under the action column, I'm going to hit view. And it gives me some information about my organization. And then it says everything that I've done up to this point, the original amount, the authorized amount, how much was drawn. That's the voucher I created. What the LOX balance is, how much is in each type of subfund, how much is committed to activities, and how much is available to draw. I find that this report is useful if you just want to get a quick summary of what you have available to you, both to commit to activities or encumber to activities, and what you've drawn down and what you've spent. And finally, I want to show you some of the functions available in the Grantee tab. From here, you can review your organizational information, and you can edit information for any of the organizations you've entered as either a project sponsor or a subrecipient. All right, I'm going to switch back. I go to the top of my navigation page and go to the Grantee/PJ tab. And wait for a minute, and it's going to pull up information about my organization, including my grantee name, my DUNS, my EIN, my address, and information about my payee information. The other thing that I can do from here is on the left side of the screen, and you remember for every tab that you go into, you have slightly different information. I can search for a subordinate information for a subordinate. That would be any organization that I've entered in as a project sponsor or a subrecipient. And I can search for that organization, entering in criteria. If you get no results displayed and you know you have a subordinate entered, you can just push search, and it'll bring up everybody, and you just have to scroll through them. From here, I can look at an organization and add and edit their information or view it. Most cases, the type of editing you would be doing has to do with the contact person. So if your contact at the organization has changed, you would edit that information from this screen. And again, this is the Grantee PJ tab. As promised, this slide provides you with additional technical assistance resources. It also appears in your manual. The Technical Assistance Unit, or TAU, will act as your general help desk. If you find a glitch in the system, report it to the TAU. If you are not sure how to do something, you can call the TAU. You will see a separate number to call if you need your IDIS password reset. And finally, at the bottom of the screen, you will see additional manuals on IDIS that you can download. This includes the MicroStrategy reporting manual I referenced earlier. Some of the manuals are general. They talk about functionality in IDIS from a general perspective. This marks the end of the webinar series using IDIS for the HOPWA competitive program. One more time, I want to give you my contact information. If you have any questions specific to HOPWA guidance or HOPWA program setup in IDIS or anything related to this webinar series, please do not hesitate to contact me. I will be happy to provide you one-on-one technical assistance as well as you're setting up your projects and activities. One side note, I'm about to go on maternity leave, and I will have on my email an out-of-office assistance with contact information for persons that you can call if you need assistance after I've left. Thank you for your participation and for the good work you do on behalf of persons living with HIV and AIDS, and I want to thank you. This marks the end of the webinar. Thank you all very much.